Hi there. We're taking a step away from our usual campaign diaries today to do some playtesting for the upcoming Commander and Guardian classes. Rather than run a one shot or anything, we wanted to see how they handle in a variety of combat encounters at a variety of levels. As such, I'm going to be going through 3 combat encounters, one using level 2 characters, one using level 5 characters, and the final using level 8 characters. Each character was built with the appropriate amount of gold as per the wealth per level chart. These fights are going to be split into 3 separate videos, so in this one we're just going to be covering the initial level 2 battle. Before each fight, I'll overview the feats that the Commander and the Guardian are using so that you know what to expect from them. Our first battle is a pretty simple one, just a standard 5v5 against some orcs. There are a few terrain features that might come into play, but nothing particularly dynamic. Our heroes are level 2 and include a Commander, a Guardian, an Investigator, a Ranger, and a Sorcerer. They'll be facing an Orc Warchief, 3 Orc Brutes, and a Wolf. The intention behind this first battle is to see how our playtest classes handle against a relatively standard skirmish between equal number of combatants. During the fight, we'll be asking questions about when certain actions are useful, pointing out holes in the wording or other things that need clarification, and discussing the general performance of the playtest classes. After the initial fight, there'll be a post-fight wrap-up about the new classes. It is worth noting that myself and my players are newcomers to Pathfinder 2e, so what you'll be seeing isn't perfect strategic combat, but instead very real gameplay by new players making mostly instinctual decisions. Now, let's quickly overview the Commander and the Guardian and what they are using. The Guardian will be running the Unkind Shove and Hampering Sweeps feats. They took the Mitigate Harm threat technique and will be wielding a Dwarven War Axe. The Commander took the Combat Assessment and Setup Strike feats. They'll be using the Form Up and Pincer Attacks tactics. They'll also be wielding a Spear and a Shield for this fight. With that out of the way, let's get into the fight. We rolled initiative, and our heroes were spread out pretty evenly between their Orc enemies. The Orc War Chief kicked us off, using Battle Cry to buff its allies and then moving forward and threw a Javelin at the Guardian. The attack was pitiful though, and missed. The Investigator was the first of our heroes to act. They used their Devise stratagem against the War Chief, which was a 2. Obviously, attacking them would do no good, so they loaded their hand crossbow and fired at one of the back orcs. Their attack missed. The first of the Orc Brutes charged forwards and swung for the Investigator. The attack was a critical miss, however, this did spark some conversation about when the Guardian's Intercept Strike should trigger. Currently, it triggers when an ally within 5 feet takes physical damage. Some of our group felt that while this was mechanically nice, intercepting at the point of targeting would make more storytelling sense. I think I would agree if they were trying to prevent the attack from landing, such as with a shield, but as they are just diving in the way to take the damage instead, having it trigger on the damage makes perfect sense to me. A second Orc Brute moved up and swung for the Guardian. Their high AC came in useful as a 18 attack roll still missed. The Guardian was next and used Hampering Sweeps. Now, I think basically everybody is already aware of how overtuned this is. For one action, the Guardian can stop every enemy within range from moving away from them. However, for the sake of discussion, there are quite a lot of questions and clarifications that need to be made if this feat sticks around. Firstly, affecting all enemies is just too much. Either it needs to be single target or increase the amount of actions it costs to target more creatures. Secondly, if a creature moves into the Guardian's range after the action was used but before it expires, are they affected? Similarly to that, if the Guardian is pushed or repositioned and ends up next to a new creature, are they now affected and is the one that shoved them freed from it? Thirdly, since this is an action that uses their weapon to achieve, should it be broken if they start attacking? As in, if they hampering sweeps and then make a strike, would that not mean they are no longer using that weapon to hampering sweeps? Also, in regard to that, can they hampering sweeps and then move adjacent to an enemy to affect them? Or is it only enemies that were currently adjacent that are affected? Lastly, how does hampering sweeps interact with different sized creatures? It seems odd that a small sized hero could stop a huge sized swarm from leaving without at least some rolls being made. Basically, what I'm getting at is this feat, even if you ignore how strong it is, leaves a lot of holes in the rules that need to be specified. The Guardian then taunted the brute in front of them. The orc failed its roll, so was successfully taunted. Compared to the previous action, this one is a lot more cut and dry. Checking in with the Guardian player after the battle, she enjoyed the taunt, but she did mention that she wishes there would have been more threat technique options. She took the one that only triggers on a crit, which never came up. Perhaps having more variety of options through the threat technique could open up more playstyles. An idea I've personally had is if the threat technique gave unique reactions or free actions if they try and target somebody else. A reaction to shove or a reaction to reaffirm the taunt with a debuff could work well. With their last action, they attacked the orc, but they missed. The final orc brute approached and attacked the commander. This was a hit and dealt 8 damage, but the Guardian used Intercepting Strike to take the damage instead. Thanks to their resistance, they only took 4 damage. A quick clarification question popped up for Intercepting Strike. It specifies that it triggers on physical damage and grants resistance to all damage. So, if an attack dealt 8 slashing damage and 8 fire damage, it would trigger, and as written, grant resistance to both damage types, even the non physical one. There's nothing wrong with this as it exists right now, it's just something to be aware of. The commander drew her spear and her shield. As the banner is on her spear, this triggered the effects of the banner. They then tried to use combat assessment, but they missed their attack. The ranger marked the war chief as their hunted prey. They then used hunter's aim, but missed. The wolf began to circle round and hid behind some cover. The sorcerer finished up the first round. They stepped away from the enemies and cast Ignition. They critically succeeded, dealing a lot of damage and setting them on fire. After this first round, it seems like the Guardian really got to show off a lot of its toys, while the Commander struggled with setup and initiative. The Commander player mentioned that at the beginning of the battle, having a good initiative seems quite important, at least with the tactics that she chose. She had been hoping to use Form Up to get everybody where they wanted to be, but by the time it was her turn, the Orcs had already ran up on the party. Obviously, this is quite anecdotal, as if her initiative roll had been better, then she could have done just that. Commanders are already experts in perception, so they have the tools they need to get a good initiative in most circumstances. As for the Guardian, the nature of their feats and actions seems to let them be very adaptable and free in how they use them. They aren't relying on other characters to be ready for them to help, as they can just move themselves into a good position and then use Intercepting Strike when it suits them. Round 2. The Orc War Chief renewed its battlecry buffs and then moved closer and threw another javelin. This one hit the commander, dealing a small amount of damage. The investigator attempted to disarm the Orc Brute but failed. He then used his deviser stratagem, got a 19, and used it to critically hit the Orc, killing it. However, Orcs have ferocity, so it used its reaction to stay alive at 1 hit point. The Orc then retaliated by critically hitting the investigator right back. It made a second attack which missed, and then with its last action it moved to the other side of them. This shouldn't have been possible due to the hampering sweeps, however. I hope once these classes are implemented into Foundry properly, they make effects for this kind of thing. This illegal move didn't end up mattering though, as the persistent fire damage finished it off. The taunted Orc Brute attacked the Guardian, making use of the +2 that Taunt gives it to its attack rolls. This +2 bonus was just enough to let it hit, dealing 6 damage, which, because it wasn't a crit, wasn't resisted. I'd consider changing the mitigate harm feature to give it resistance anyway, and then making it increase with a crit, as at the moment it doesn't come into effect very often, and just means that taunting an enemy makes it more likely to hit you. Either that, or the Guardians need to match the Barbarian's 12 hit points, so they can safely pull all this damage to themselves. The Guardian moved into flanking and attacked. The attack hit and dealt maximum damage, which would have killed if not for the Orc's ferocity reaction. With their last action, they used hampering sweeps again to stop it from getting away. The final Orc Brute attacked the commander, hitting for 9 damage. It then successfully repositioned the commander, placing them within reach of the war chief. A final attack was made but missed. I was surprised that the commander doesn't get any feats or tactics to counter this kind of play. The commander seems in a really good spot, so I wouldn't necessarily encourage making them too much stronger. However, the lack of reaction-based tactics is a little surprising. Having a reaction tactic that lets your allies help out or retaliate to an attack seems fitting for the power fantasy of the commander. The commander was next and used Pincer Attack, letting her allies take the step action and making all enemies that ended up adjacent to those moving heroes off guard. This off guard lasts until the start of their next turn. This is the only ability the commander used that felt overly strong, especially when used at this point in the battle. With so many melee fighters on the field and most of them already being in position, a step is more than enough to cover all the active combatants. In our example, just the Guardian stepping was enough to cause all 3 Orcs to become off guard. I would consider making each stepping ally choose a target to make off guard, and even then, perhaps only having it last until the first successful attack. As it stands, when used in a good moment, this is a very strong tactic that can be easily used every round for only 1 action. With the Guardian having used hampering sweeps and then being allowed to step, they questioned whether it now applied to all 3 of them. I obviously didn't have an answer for this yet, so I ruled that it only affected the initial Orc due to it costing an action to activate. The commander then drank a healing potion, regaining a sad 1 hit point. Then they raised their shield. The ranger used Hunted Shot to make 2 attacks against the war chief, but sadly both missed. A third and a fourth attack were made at multiple attack penalty 3, and surprisingly both these hit. The wolf ran up on the guardian, flanking them and triggering its pack attack. It used its bite and hit thanks to flanking. The guardian took 10 damage and then it tried to use knockdown but failed. The sorcerer cast heal, giving the commander 14 hit points. Then they used glass shield as a cantrip. After round 2, the commander had gotten to shine a bit. The tactic they chose, pincer attack, seems really strong, especially when used after everybody's already in position. I checked in with the other players and they all confirmed that they enjoyed getting to use the tactic. It felt like a pivotal moment in the battle where they really needed to push. Round 3. The war chief used battle cry again. It then moved around, flanking the commander and hitting them with its great club. The commander used their shield block reaction to reduce the damage a bit. The investigator used to devise a stratagem on the war chief and got a 12. With their modifiers, that would be enough for a successful hit, but only because of the off guard from the commander. They then moved into flanking and stabbed them. The first orc brute was under the effects of hampering sweeps, so despite being very wounded, it couldn't back off. So they began swinging for the guardian. It swung for them 3 times, but all of the attacks missed. Hampering sweeps seems especially disruptive to an enemy that lacks a multi-action option, as it leaves them in a position where they essentially have to deal with the guardian. I suppose this is on brand for a tank class, but you'd want that to come from the taunts or the intercepting strikes, and not from an optional, overpowered class feat. The guardian went next and shoved the brute. They critically succeeded, and thanks to the unkind shove feat, they dealt enough damage to kill the orc. However, it had its reaction back, so ferocity kept it on its feet. The guardian moved with the shove as they're allowed to do. They then moved up and attacked the other brute. A max damage roll took the orc to 0 hit points, but it also used ferocity to stay alive. The brute that had just been attacked retaliated with an attack that missed. Deciding it was unlikely to get through the high AC, it swapped to the commander for its second attack, which did hit. The guardian intercepted and took damage for the commander. After applying resistances, this was only 3 damage. With the last attack, it moved to give the war chief flanking. The main plan here was to bait the commander into moving so that the war chief could use their reactive strike. The commander chose not to move, instead stabbing the orc. Since it had just had its turn, its reaction was back, so once again it used ferocity to stay alive. However, the commander committed to putting them down, stabbing them again, and this time killing them for good. They then raised their shield again. Interestingly, the commander's unique feature, tactics, seemingly can end up getting put on the back burner when in the rush of combat. While the Guardian's unique abilities synergize well in an all-out brawl, the commander has to often choose between using tactics or just fighting themselves. In the turn just now, the commander definitely made the right call by simply attacking and confirming the kill on the orc, but it was at the expense of getting to use a tactic. The ranger continued to focus the war chief. They used Hunter's Aim to fire an antler arrow. The attack hit, but the war chief saved against the effects of the antler arrow. They then used Hunter's Shot, but sadly both these attacks missed. The wolf could no longer pack attack, so moved up to the guardian, attacked, and missed. It made the second attack, but this also missed. The sorcerer moved past the war chief, but stayed within its reach, so I couldn't reactive strike them. It then used Rejuvenating Flames to heal their allies and harm the wolf. However, the wolf did critically succeed the save and was unharmed. Finishing up round 3, I'm happy that no one seems to be outshining anybody else yet. The investigator, ranger, and rogue are certainly pulling their weight in the fight, but they aren't outperforming or being outperformed by the playtest classes. I'd perhaps argue that the guardian seems to be especially present in the fight, but that might just be because we're paying special attention to them, being the focus of the playtest and all. The commander still feels like they aren't getting to use their cool stuff all that often. They feel balanced, which is good, but when you compare them to the other classes, the investigator is using Devise a Strategy every turn. The sorcerer is casting spells every turn. The ranger is using their unique shots every turn. Even the guardian is using intercepting strikes regularly. The commander, however, is having to achieve their goals and hold their own through methods other than their tactics. This is, of course, down to the player choices, but I wouldn't say they're making bad tactical choices. The commander foregoing their tactic to confirm the kill on the orc was the correct choice in that moment. Round 4. The war chief used Battle Cry once again and then attacked the sorcerer. The attack missed, but a second swing hit. I was desperately trying to get these squishy heroes to run away from the war chief so that it could use its reactive strike. The investigator moved to the guardian and used battle medicine plus risky surgery. The medicine check tragically failed, and the guardian instead took damage and gained no healing, even after a hero point was used. With their last action, they tried to disarm the war chief but failed. The brute attacked the ranger twice, one missing and one hitting. It then backed off as it was low health. The The Guardian drank their potion as the damage from intercepting strikes had slowly been adding up. They then hit the wolf, dealing a fair amount of damage. A second attack was attempted but missed. The Guardian had wanted to shove again, but didn't want to drop their two-handed weapon into one hand to do it. With so many possibilities for playstyles with the Guardian, choosing feats and equipment that synergize seems really important. They have options that use shields, they have options that use two handed weapons, options that involve shoving. In a strange way, the feats you choose can kind of lock you into specific weapons. The commander attacked the war chief with a setup strike. A hit allowed them to make the orc off guard against the next attack made against them. They then tried and failed to demoralize the war chief, and finally raised their shield again. The commander seems to have a lot of ways of making enemies off guard, at least in the build that this player took. Off guard is a really powerful condition, especially when paired with something like a rogue. While they haven't been able to use their tactics or unique feats very often, when they do, it's always very impactful to the battle. The other players agreed that having a commander was absolutely a boon and not a hindrance. The ranger kept their focus on the war chief, using Hunter's aim to keep chipping away at its health. It used ferocity to stay alive, but a hunted shot allowed them to bring it down for good. The wolf charged the ranger, successfully biting them. The guardian used intercepting strike and took the damage. This then led to an interesting question as the wolf wanted to use its knockdown action. However, since the guardian had taken the damage, we weren't sure whether the knockdown would apply to the ranger or the guardian. The intent behind these follow up actions monsters have is to be semi combos. They're meant to be an optional part of the attack, but the guardian only takes the damage, not the attack roll. In a situation like this, it makes mechanical sense that the ranger would take the knockdown, but it makes roleplay sense that the guardian would. This also raises the question of persistent damage, diseases, and other effects that monsters might have on their attacks. I think it needs clarifying whether the Guardian takes everything or just the damage and the effects still go to the initial target. The Sorcerer moved up next to the Guardian, mentioning that it's so they could be protected if needs be. It's interesting that even after one battle, the players have begun to see the Guardian as a safe space and desire a position next to them. They then cast Ignition on the Orc Brute, a crit set them on fire, so even though they ferocitied to stay alive for now, the death was imminent. By now, everybody had found their feet with their interactions with the new classes. People had begun positioning themselves so that they were in range of the Guardian's intercepting strikes, but I do hope this doesn't become something they expect. It should still be down to the Guardian if they want to use it and are willing to take that damage. There might be moments where the Guardian needs their reaction for another plan, or it doesn't feel safe to take the damage. A respectful player shouldn't have a problem with that, but I can see tables where that guy demands they are protected. On the topic of rangers, the Commander's Banner does a really good job of encompassing the whole group. In an adventure path such as Abomination Vaults, check out our campaign diaries after this video, this banner would likely always be in range. However, due to the small rooms and tight corridors, it will be hard to keep it always in vision, which is a requirement of it working. Positioning will be incredibly important to a commander, and things like shoves and repositions could really hamper their effectiveness in certain environments. Round 5. With only 2 enemies left, the investigator targeted the Orc Brute and used their Deviser stratagem. They rolled a 12, which confirmed they would hit and kill. They ran up to the Orc, and with no reaction to save them, the Orc died. The Guardian used tampering sweeps to keep the wolf locked in place and then struck it with their axe. The wolf survived the initial damage and a second attack missed. The commander moved into flanking and struck out with their spear. 2 attacks and 2 misses. The ranger assigned the wolf as their new hunted prey and, with Unter's aim, dealt 1 damage. Somehow, the wolf had survived to get a turn, but it could not move. It attacked the ranger and hit, but the guardian took the damage, resisting the full amount. It then attacked again and hit again. This time, the guardian couldn't intercept, so the ranger took 7 damage. It tried to knock down the ranger, but a critical fail left it prone instead. The sorcerer approached and, with a final ignition, killed the wolf, ending the battle. Having completed the demo battle, we had a wrap up conversation about the playtest classes. Most of the points we talk about have been added when relevant throughout the battle report. However, it's always good to hear it from the people who got to experience it. So I shall let the wrap up play out as it is. For those of you
Cool.
playing the playtest classes, any
Mhm.
initial thoughts about the one you're playing?
Um, at this level, I like that it's kinda more about protecting other people, and I think you can strategically pick who you, oh god, what's it called? Instep strike, so you don't take any damage, which I didn't realize at the start. And I think taunt is interesting. I don't and I think the different types of taunt would be interesting to play.
Okay.
I don't think mitigate harm would happen very often. I don't know. Unkind Shove was really fun. I like shoving characters, so I thought that was cool, and I kind of wish that my monk had it. And I think Hampering Sweeps is absolutely ridiculous.
Okay.
That does seem strong when it hits everything.
Yeah, and I do think like the questions we had about like if something moves into the range, if I move into the range, like if it spreads or not. Because I think if it does spread to other characters, then that is actually not
I mean,
balanced
I
very
think it
well.
does because it's like basically you designate that like everything within range is under attack. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, again, it's basically like hampering sweeps, even from like the name of it. It's like I'm sweeping the weapon around and it means they can't
Mm.
move.
You're just constantly twirling.
I would also
yeah,
Yeah.
I'd also question whether that has to be like an end of a turn thing. Because if you start hampering sweeping and then you're attacking,
Mm.
like surely
Yeah,
you're
you'd
no longer
stop,
hampering,
right?
right?
no,
Yeah,
but maybe you're
exactly.
attacking with the hampering sweeps. Like then,
Well,
like why
that's
wouldn't hampering sweeps be something you
it's
can?
kind of different like imagery in my head. Like you sweeping your weapon around to make it hard to move isn't going to be a very good
Yeah.
damaging attack that's like targeted.
I mean, I don't
Anyway,
know.
more questions.
I agree with that. I do think I shouldn't
I
have gone
don't.
for I think if I shouldn't have gone for a two-handed weapon if I wanted to use the shove. I didn't realize I couldn't shove a two-handed weapon, so I would have
You
done that
have a thing
differently.
for that though. I think later, or maybe
Yeah, so I
something they
think it
didn't
would
pick.
later on, I think it would
Yeah,
be
what's it called? Let's
better.
find it real quick.
You can also pick a two-handed weapon that has the shove trait to overcome that.
Yeah, and I think in my level 8 character, I think I have a weapon that has the shove trait, I think, and the parry trait. I can't. Let me have a look.
Yeah, here it
Um,
is.
Retribution Axe. No, I'm trying absolute nonsense. But I think
No, wait, that's strong.
I took in the level 8 one a feat so I can parry with my weapon.
Ah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I think that would be a good like
Hmm.
add-on to this if I didn't want to shove.
Yeah,
If
I
I
think
wanted
like in
to.
that case, you'd want something like a halberd or something. I think they have
Yeah,
halberds.
yeah. So I like the balance of if you want to be able to shove something, you can have a one-handed weapon and then shove them to do a bit more damage, but then also you can maybe get something that means you can parry with it. I like the options, but I'm gonna show
Yeah.
them now.
Right.
Halberd.
And Arvid, what are your thoughts on Commander?
I think it has. Yeah, I'm not muted. I think that's like the being able to make something so often off guard is really cool. I felt a little bit squishy, but that might also be because I got unlucky with my position and should have repositioned myself. Also, the how do you even call them? The commands I can give. One of them I think was nicely suited for this fight. The other one not so much, because we have so many ranged people in our group.
Hmm.
And the arena was really small, but I didn't know what everyone is playing, nor which enemies we are fighting, so that one was basically useless for this fight. But I think that's something, if you actually play a campaign and you know the people in your group, you're not gonna run into this problem.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
just a situational thing.
Do you
But
feel
yeah,
like do you feel like you had enough opportunities to use your tactics, or like enough to do if you weren't using a tactic?
it definitely had enough to do. Like, there are so many, like, the things you can do with your normal attacks combined. I think they're really cool. But yeah, the tactics were just. I was in a bad spot in the initiative to use them because all the melees had already moved and were in position for the next thing. The enemies wouldn't have moved away already for me to use them, since both of the things I choose are movement based.
Right.
Oh.
So that was like the range
Yeah, when they're
are not
like
going to
the
move
fight is more
anyway.
stagnant.
Yeah, this arena was also very small, so I
Mm,
think that's also something that plays into it.
I was really surprised at the range of your banner. I thought that was really, really generous.
It is really like one of the things I chose is that you can actually stride inside the banner once, like as much as you like, basically.
Oh, is that for the whole like all of your allies or just you?
All of my allies, I think it's everyone
Dang.
but me.
Yeah,
So
you
if
have to move up or
Oh.
whatever it is, like getting into position, like at the start of a
yes,
fight.
it's called form up,
Mm.
and yeah, I think that was really nice. Like I
So
thought if I'm high
cool.
in the initiative or the melees would just not have moved yet, I would have
Mm,
casted that so you can spend more time or more points on your attacks.
that's cool.
But yeah, that was just unlucky, basically.
Yeah, I like from seeing how you played it, I can imagine how if you played it longer, you would be able to unpick things a lot more and find the best way for it works with your party.
Yeah, usually you're also like every day you can choose which formations you want to have. But I just chose static ones for this one since we're only doing fights. So I think if you actually play it properly, it's way more interesting than just in a stagnant fight.
Mm.
Okay. All right. It only happened once for this fight, but as the other players did having like a tactic sort of presented to you, is that something that like you enjoyed for the I guess for the
Yeah,
the
the pincer
pincer
move was
attack?
awesome.
The pincer move is
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah, it's quite difficult from playing a ranger who didn't move once the entire fight.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah,
I
it's like
thought.
it's like you say
Yeah.
with the situational stuff. It's like it seems like one of those things that is just you have to be so in tune with everyone
Like,
to know
I was
like how you
playing-
best play.
if having my summoner on it, that would have been incredibly useful.
Yeah,
I think it's
a lot of
also
our
important.
tactics for ranged attacks too. Like they can like use their thing and like let you reload on like for free and stuff like that.
Yeah, but for that I would have needed to know what everyone is playing.
Yeah.
I think I think it goes the opposite way too. I think it's really useful. I mean, we couldn't do that in a fight, obviously, just now, but it's really useful if we know what you do, like properly, to know that. Oh, if I move here, I won't be in range of that, or you can't use that. Whatever that will benefit me. Then it adds more dynamic element to, rather than everyone being like, I'm going to do this for me, and it's like, oh, well, we could all benefit if I move here or I do this.
Yeah, and in an actual campaign, it makes sense for you to like actually tell everyone what you're using because, as far as I know, how it works is that like in the morning when you pick your things, you actually drill the people you have as your
Yes.
squad mates in those maneuvers. So you actually like,
Yes.
you should like you should post them, and tell everyone about how they work or something like that. At least to begin with. So you
Yeah.
like give that information to the players as well.
As
And
said,
with that, it would work well.
in the campaign it would make way more sense. But
Mm.
like
For
I
sure.
did it blind to the fights and blind to what other people are playing, so
No, you did
Yeah.
really well with it. Like
Yeah, for sure.
when you were playing with it, I was like, oh, I'm so glad I'm not playing this because it seems really complicated.
Yeah.
also imagine the roleplay aspects of me being able, for example, to drill Tiny in the morning. I would love that so much.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
That would be cool. And I do think as well with the pincer movement, it meant because in my head I was like, oh damn, I need to be like one step up. I really need to get back into the main group. And then it meant I could get back into the main group. And then the fact that it also put them all into off guard was really cool. So
Yeah,
even though like that one was more beneficial to melee, I feel like the payoff was that it did a lot for the people that did move. So
that's true.
it would be really interesting in a campaign to see the different ones, but obviously in this fight you couldn't.
It changes
And
the pace of it as well, because like if you get everyone off guard, it's immediately like, oh shit, we need to press advantage.
Yeah, which
Like
is
we need
really
we need to
cool.
start doing something rather than being like passive, So
And I
like,
think I think it did change like the course of the fight, which is really cool.
All right, and that's it for the first battle report. There's definitely a lot to think about and lots of clarifications that are needed, especially for the Guardian. Feel free to leave your comments about your own experiences playing the Commander and the Guardian, what you liked about them, what you disliked. I'll see you in the second battle report, in which we'll be having our players face off against a single higher level enemy. See you then.